Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. I'm excited to be beginning on the series of Imam Nawawi's famous Hadith collection, Al-Arba'un Al-Nawawiyya. This Hadith collection is just very pivotal, and it's something that all Muslims should have on their bookshelf as something they return to, they reflect on. It's also something we can share with our children as they grow older, and I just found profound benefit in it. So I want to take, inshallah, the next 5 Fridays and get into this collection a little bit with you. I'll hope that you all have an engaging discussion after watching this, and I would love to hear about the sorts of comments and things that come up, as this is a kind of pre-recorded talk that I've prepared for you on this blessed day of Jummah, and Jummah Mubarak to you all. I hope you and your families are doing well. So I think what we're going to do for today is just begin with the life of the author, and connecting with the author is a very beautiful thing in our tradition. It allows you to bring the person to life, the heart to life that is behind the compilation that we have before us today. And it's a way to feel connected to the Ummah, it's a way to feel connected to other believers, and it's a way to honor people that are deeply rooted in knowledge, and to connect ourselves to that legacy in a beautiful way, just by way of appreciation and gratitude. There's a lot of spiritual benefits in, I think, really learning about the people that write the material that we take in, especially as it relates to books that connect to our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So with that said, let's get into it. So we'll begin with the name of the author. The full name of the author is Imam Yahya Abu Zakaria Muhyiddin ibn Sharaf al-Nawawi. Now, you can see by the bin Sharaf al-Nawawi that his father is the son of Sharaf, right? Of Sharaf. And we'll see that in a moment. In addition to the name, let me just share with you some of the titles, and kind of explain these titles, because they have rich meaning. It's not just these honorifics that do not have substance to it. That's not the way our tradition is. Especially our biographers, when they write an entry on a particular scholar or person of notable, of note, scholarly note, they will indicate what esteem they hold this individual in the milieu of that environment, right? In the milieu of how others perceived this individual's scholarship, this individual's character, this individual's way of being. So all of that is sometimes captured in some of these titles. So don't assume that these are just exaggerations, right? So there's a famous historian, biographer, Imam al-Dhahabi, and his work is often considered very fair in the way that he describes and judges other scholars and people. Meaning he made an effort to really restrain himself when it comes down to being fair in his sort of biographical entries. So we have under Imam Nawawi's entry as him being referred to Mufti al-Ummah. Mufti al-Ummah. So we all know what a mufti is, right? To an extent, I would say. Someone who gives fatwas, right? Nowadays, I think we really sort of cheapen this term, but this was like a real specialist in the law that could respond to live issues. And al-Ummah here, the second piece, that he is the Mufti of the Ummah, really indicates that, he is the Mufti of, all of the believers at that time. So that is to say that that's how people are perceiving his mastery of law, of Islamic law. That is how other notable scholars and people of character viewed him. He's also been referred as Shaykhul Islam al-Hafiz, And that al-hafid, that last part there, al-hafid, is actually not just like Hafid al-Quran, but it refers to the hadith scholars in our tradition. So he is an authority in hadith, Shaykh al-Islam al-Hafiz. Then you also have al-Faqih, al-Shafi'i. So this, that he is a faqih, someone who deals with fiqh, right? A faqih, but someone who's a master of fiqh, right? And then Ash-Shafi'i, saying or indicating that essentially he is the head jurist of the Shafi'i school. He is at the top of his field in the Shafi'i school. He was also known as a Zahid, and a Zahid is essentially someone that renounces the world or disattaches from the dunya, right? They work hard to root out their heart's attachments to this world, though they operate in it. Then finally, he has been referred to as Ahadul A'lam. Ahadul A'lam, so one of the towering figures. And linguistically here, alam, right, means actually, I don't want to make a mistake here. Ahadul A'lam has been translated as towering figure. Okay. So he's someone that really stood out to the people in his time, and we're going to see that it's not just amongst the scholarly class, but he stood out amongst the ordinary people as well, and we're going to get into why that is the case. All right. So now we're going to focus a bit on his childhood. So he's born in the village of Nawa in Syria. Okay, that's why it's Imam Nawawi. He was born in Nawa in Syria in 631 after Hijri, which translates into 1233. So the 13th century, roughly. He's living in the time of the Mongols and the Crusaders. As I mentioned previously, his father's name was Sharafuddin an-Nawawi, right? So Sharaf being like an ennoblement, so he's sort of the noble one of the religion. Sharafuddin an-Nawawi. And his father, Sharaf, was noticed that this young man was gifted, and so he really wanted to invest in his son's talents. And he noticed that he had a kind of aptitude for education, and so he did invest in him. And it's said by the age of 10, Imam Nawawi had the Quran memorized. And this is very common, in these earlier phases of our history, that young people, especially gifted young children, were really groomed, and their parents took special interest in them. And honestly, I think there's a lot in this for us in our time as well, that we're so busy often that we don't even notice our children's talents and what their gifts are that God has naturally given them, and then we don't really pursue that path to help them develop it. But here we have an example of a beautiful father who has taken the time to notice, my son may have a gift in terms of his intelligence, so let me nurture that. Let's continue now. Moving on to his education. Imam Nawawi, it said that in order to continue his education, he then moves to Damascus, right, the bigger city. So he's going from the village to the bigger city, a more urban environment, and he does so at the age of 18 in 649 after Hijri, or 1251. He moves there to continue his studies, and it's said that among the earliest of his teachers, once he arrives here, is named Ishaq Ahmad al-Maghribi. Ishaq Ahmad al-Maghribi, who dies in 650 after Hijri. So just a year after Imam al-Nawawi arrives, this teacher of his passes away, right? And the school that he kind of associates with this teacher in is the Rawahiyya school. The Rawahiyya school, famous school, or a well-known, notable school in the... actually, I'm not sure how well-known it was, but I'm assuming that it was probably well-known, the Rawahiyya. And, he, I want to actually touch, on his relationship with his teacher. This is really important. When we think about Sunday school teachers, when we think about our professors even, or when we think about people that have really taught us the religion, not just in the external form, but in a sense that really combines what it means to live out the religion in character as well as ritual. These are real teachers. And, we have the example of this teacher that only, Imam Nawawi just spends 1 year with him, but he has a tremendous impact on his, way of being. We're going to see. So when he arrives, this teacher houses him, right? He actually provides him accommodation personally, right? And so nowadays, a lot of times, our scholars, our people that have some religious training, are always in compromised situations and dependent situations. But you see here dignity and independence in that the teacher is able of their own accord to house their student, right? And the meaning of being able to house a student, when a student receives that kind of generosity and care as well as sees, it automatically builds a kind of respect there, right? Rather than the teacher not having any resources to provide to their student, or it's provided by an external entity, or the teacher's resources are very limited. This all affects, as we know, human psychology and the way the student will learn and take from the teacher and how they will respect them. So right away we see that there's an element of care and concern and dignity and respect that can be afforded merely by this transaction that can occur in this particular milieu. He also noticed that his teacher, Ahmed al-Maghribi, would refuse all kinds of prestigious positions and offers, to work for perhaps the state apparatus, and out of basically perhaps a sense of not wanting to mix knowledge with power, because often power corrupts, right? One of my teachers likes to say, as-siyasa nijasa, right? As-siyasa najasa. That politics are, by its nature, corrupting. And so many of our scholars would be very weary of their interaction with power. And I think that's a really beautiful thing we have to revive, but we also have to give community leaders and real scholars the financial independence, the respect that they deserve, the means that they need to be able to refuse these offers and still hold their own. And I think that's sort of what we're missing today. And these scholars are really scholars of the Akhirah. They know that scholars of the Akhirah is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, something that Imam al-Ghazali radiallahu anhu used to refer to the ulama that don't live, that don't study and teach in order to earn a living, right? They study and teach in order to earn a house in paradise. They study and teach because they're strictly focused on the next life, right? A little knowledge that is put into action is better than a lot of it that's not put into action, right? And the scholars of the Akhirah understand this, so they combine an accumulation of knowledge, but they also combine it with action. They go together. And this existed in our tradition and it still exists, but it's becoming more and more rare. So even we can take, a lesson from that, in that whatever I know, am I acting on it? Am I behaving? And am I acting on the basis of what I already know? Continuing briefly, just to conclude the piece on his education, Imam Nawawi, he studies fiqh, Islamic law, hadith, the science of narrations, usul al-fiqh, right? So the principles of jurisprudence, ilm al-rijal, again this is kind of an ancillary science, the knowledge of men, or human narrators, really, right? The knowledge in regards to those that narrate these hadith, and usul al-din, which is really referring to like aqidah and beliefs. So he's studying these various sciences, if you will, or disciplines within the Islamic tradition, and it's a very intense curriculum, right? So they had 12 classes a day, right, which would take a minimum of 12 hours a day. So we're talking, sometimes we hear about these things and we think, this can't be possible, but I think we got to let our imagination, not be so anachronistic, right? That we're kind of living in the modern moment where our distraction levels are so high. We're disconnected from nature, from one another. Time is very fast. It's not slow, but in an environment that's very different, right? In which time is slower, in which you have a educational environment that emphasizes a kind of minimalism, right? To really pursue and focus on these goals. We can imagine that, these scholars were really putting in a lot of time. Even if, let's suppose that it wasn't 12, though it said historically it was 12, so I'm going to take the word for that, but even if it was less than that, we can imagine a very, very demanding regimen here. So he's in his studies a minimum of 12 hours a day, minimizing his food and sleep, as we'll see, in order to pursue this goal. Because, again, scholars of the Akhirah, their idea is that there's very little time left in my life, and this life is only here for me to reap reward. I'm living for the next life. I don't fundamentally live for this life. And that's in their hearts and in their actions and the way they are, and they don't have to be outright ulama, It can be people that are true people of the Akhirah, but they don't necessarily pursue knowledge the way some of our scholars do. Alright, moving on to his scholarship now. He completes his studies at 25 years old. So about 7 years he's dedicated, as I said, with this intense kind of regimen, right? And he arrived, as I said, in Damascus at age 18, and now he's age 25 when he completes it. So about 7 years. It's said that once he graduates, he's a very prolific writer. So he writes books in fiqh, hadith, aqidah, belief, and it's said that they number over 50 books. So extremely prolific scholar. He works on multiple books at a time, so he's not sort of like he's jumping around, and he's really creating a lot of material for people, for their benefit. And it's said that he became such a master in these disciplines, especially in fiqh, that his fiqh books become references for the muftis and judges of his time. So other muftis and judges, and now again, we're living in a time, where much of these institutions are funded by awqaf, right? Awqaf is plural for waqf, which is an endowment, and so either they're privately endowed or they're endowed through the government, and these endowments are running all of these institutions, right? So when you think of Harvard and MIT and all these top tier educational institutions, this is sort of the analogy of where they're living, what this reference is. And Islamic law, unlike now, is very much rooted in these the court system and the basic adjudication of justice at a practical social level. And so these muftis and judges are dealing with real time issues, right? Cutting edge issues of their time, and everything is going through these courts, right? So his fiqh books become references for these legal authorities of his time, right? That's kind of the weight of the sort of place he reaches. Just another note on his scholarship is that a famous text that Imam Nawawi radiallahu anhu has authored is Riyadh al-Salihin, right? The pastures of the righteous. And the Riyadh al-Salihin is a very famous text. I think most of you probably have heard of it. It's a beautiful text with another collection of narrations, right? Of hand-picked hadith that Imam Nawawi has kind of had put together, and it's sort of still household item for many Muslim homes. They'll have it on their shelf. Many masjids will kind of have it there as well. So it's kind of lasted through the test of time, which kind of speaks to the blessings that God has, sort of given to Imam Nawawi, in that he is still being rewarded for his work, right? And one of the signs of sincerity is that the work of that individual lasts beyond them, and they continue to earn the reward from God for those things. Just gonna take a moment here. I think what's important now to mention is that Imam Nawawi was someone who was very dedicated to his tazkiyah, or self-purification. He wanted to clean his heart, and he wanted to focus on his goal of the akhirah. And we're gonna get into that a bit now. I just need a moment, actually.